Hey, everybody, and welcome to Cancer in the Room, the podcast. Now, the goal of our podcast is to highlight the inspiring stories of athletes, sports executives, and media personalities who have faced and beaten cancer. In the sports world, the term cancer in the room is often applied to a person whose behavior is disruptive and negative toward their teammates or organization. Now, in our particular case, all of us on this podcast have cancer or continue to battle cancer each and every day. Now, our spin is this. The battle is real. It's hard, but we all have a ton of life to live, and we all wish to, try to blow through all of this and enjoy it as much as we possibly can. So that's the cancer in the room, and we're striving to push forward in a positive manner, and that's what this is all about. And we also love talking about sports. And my name is Bryn Griffiths, and he is Dave Jamieson.
Joining us on Cancer in the Room today is a very talented and versatile broadcaster. Bryan Mudryk has covered 3 Olympics. He's the voice of the Montreal Canadiens, and he is one of our country's leading commentators on the sport of curling. Diagnosed as a teenager, Bryan has beaten cancer not once but twice, and he is an advocate for ongoing research, and his initiatives have raised close to $2 million for cancer research. Bryan Mudryk, welcome to Cancer in the Room. Muddy, we like to start really at sort of day one. You get the cancer diagnosis. When was that? Can you remember what your reaction was and how it changed your life?
I don't think you could ever forget it. I remember being 17. I had a couple of baseball scholarships I was hoping to play and maybe get an opportunity to go down to the States and play. I didn't have the God-given left-handed 95-mile-an-hour arm, but, I had a pretty good work ethic, and I thought I had a chance to at least get some schooling and get some more baseball experience. I love the game so much. And I remember not feeling great, felt a lump in my neck here, and I just told my mom about it. And 3 days later, I had a biopsy. And I just remember, coming out of it, and my parents were crying. And I didn't quite grasp what was going on. And they were in tears, and I knew something was bad. And I was told that I had cancer. And me being as naive as I was like, okay, get me some aspirin or whatever. I got I got baseball tryouts. Let's go, right? And I'll never forget it. Never forget that day.
This is a radical change in your life, obviously, but how much did it change things?
Oh, Bryn, I'll be honest with you. At first, again, maybe it's just 17. You're naive. You have no idea what you're up against. I don't know if that was good or bad at the time, but it was shocking. It was scary.
Right.
But again, I just thought, okay, I was told, my cancer was treatable and beatable. I thought it was just going to be, like I said, you just take some medication or do a few things and you move on. And boy, was I ever wrong. That was not the case. I could tell you countless stories of things that, a 17-year-old shouldn't have to go through or deal with. But what I've really learned over the years is that actually talking and having these forums, and kudos to you guys. I think this is amazing. And it was my privilege to join you. Is we have to talk about this stuff. I mean, yeah. I had so many uncomfortable situations, and I'll be quite blunt. I had not even had sex yet, and I'm 17, and a nurse is telling me, do I want to have kids someday? And I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah, okay, sir, take this, take this thing, go into that room. Your parents are outside, fill this specimen. I'm like, what? Yeah. I can laugh about it now, but at the time you're just like, what is happening? This isn't right. All of this is wrong. Yeah. I'm being asked to make decisions at 17. Do I want to be a father someday? I haven't even had a real girlfriend yet. I was a pretty shy kid, which might shock you, Bryn, but I was actually a really shy kid. I was a great athlete and grew up in a little town, but, I love my family. I love sports. I love to compete. And, that was awful, and then I guess what I will say is all these years later, it's changed me, I think, for the better in a lot of ways. You can never teach perspective. You got to learn it. And that's one of many stories I could share and would be willing to share, because I think this is a wonderful form. And I think it's important for people that have beat this thing to tell their stories, and for young people, old people, doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. Like, it's okay to, to talk about stuff and how you're feeling.
Bryan, as you said, you're 17. You're really just getting started in life. You arrive at a place where you have wisdom from years spent on the planet and your experiences. So you're 17. Where do you draw your inspiration from, and where do you sort of go to lean on? Would it have been parents? Would it have been friends? Would it have been, where did you go to get help?
I remember my dad. There was a gentleman, and I feel terrible, I don't remember his name, but at the time, as you guys, it's a blur, right? You're just trying to hang on. Yeah. And my dad introduced me to a guy who was, I think at the time, I think my age now, so I'm 44, and who had beat it, which I think is great. I mean, of course you want to meet someone who has had what you've been through, and you see this guy who has been down the road and beat it. And so that, I think, was important. That's just a small microcosm of why I started to later on do my golf tournament and try to help young people more, to keep not only just have an open dialogue and a conversation, but to make sure there was an outlet to help people that were in a similar situation to me. I was lucky to have a great family. I mean, I was from a hardworking small town, mom and dad that, we didn't have a lot, but I never remembered not getting, baseball equipment or sports or getting to play or to travel. They always did enough. And that when you're young, you don't know how little you have, but like, I never went without, right? I was always food on the table. I always got to compete. I always got to go to the tournaments, and we traveled around Western Canada and beyond for baseball and other things. So I was very blessed that way. Great family support, good friends. And I think, us Ukrainians were tough to kill, man. Pretty stubborn. So stubborn's always been one of my things.
The other thing too, your family has run the gamut when it comes to cancer. Just tell everybody the story of the Mudryk family, because cancer hasn't just touched you.
Yeah, Bryn, it's not a day goes by I don't think about my brother Marty Mudryk. We lost him, God, now 6 years ago. And it's crazy. Like, I remember when I was sick, and it was my second run with it. And I was at the Cross Cancer in Edmonton. I was doing a stem cell transplant. And my brother was supposed to go on a trip at the time, I think with his buddies to Mexico or whatever. And he stuck around. I just don't think he had it in his heart to leave. And he didn't know, like, did I need maybe blood or something? And he just wouldn't leave. And we were 4 years apart. And so obviously he was a big part of my life and his two boys. And then he was diagnosed. I'll never forget, I was in Florida at the time, and I got a phone call from my brother in tears. And he's like, "Yeah, buddy, we got another battle." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And his cancer was, oh my goodness, I can't even, it was such a rare cancer. I think 3% of people get it.
Right.
And you can beat yourself up all you want about why my brother, why our family. The crazy thing was when Marty was diagnosed, we went and got our DNA and our blood tested. There's no cancer really in our family. There was no genetic anything in our DNA that would suggest that we should have, or, for two brothers to have cancer. Obviously mine, Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was, compared to what he had, I had like the Melrose Place cancer. Like, his was like basically no chance. I mean, he was a huge part. We started the Bryan Mudryk Golf Classic. I remember being at the Cross. I was 139 pounds, soaking wet, just a shell of myself. And I remember my mom, literally, I couldn't even walk out of there. And she wheeled me out of there. And I remember saying, "Mom, we're going to raise $1 million for this hospital." And she says, "Why don't you just try put on 10 pounds first?" And we raised just under 2 million. And we're very proud of that. And we like to think we helped a lot of kids and families along the way. And losing my brother, just sort of, man, did that take the wind out of my sails. I remember many things, but I had to say, had to. I had to say goodbye to him when he was still alive. It was my first year doing the Montreal Canadiens, and he wasn't well. And I flew back. I was calling Oilers and Flames kind of back to back, and we just knew like he wasn't well. And I went and talked to him, and I, just it's like we just knew like I wasn't going to see him again, and he didn't want me to be coming back, and he wanted me to do what I was doing, and we told each other we loved him. I promised him I'd call a Game 7, and he said he'd be watching.
You talk about it taking the wind out of your sails, though, but I guess he would be proud of what you've done. No question about that. But can you use his memory to put more wind back into your sails? Because one of the things that we've all kind of recognized is that we find ways to feed our fire as we move forward, because we're fighters. We're guys who have kind of beaten it back. Not all stories are successful stories, but we know a lot of people who have been able to find a way to get through this and now are surging forward. How are you able to use his memory to continue to boost your to throw more wood on the Bryan Mudryk fire?
Oh, Bryn, every damn day, man. No matter like a cool memory. I mean, getting to say goodbye was really nice and tell him I loved him. When he was when I found out I got the job to broadcast the Montreal Canadiens, it was worked out perfect. I was flying home already, like the next day or 2 days after Paul Graham said, "The job's yours." And I flew out there, and kind of for fun, I kind of put it on this like little envelope, and it basically read something like, the bearer of this letter gets a trip for 4 to the Bell Center in Montreal as a special guest of the new play-by-voice of Voice of the Montreal Canadiens. And so they open up the letter. My nephew Tegan reads it. No one has any idea what the hell's going on. Like my parents, like everyone's kind of clueless, except my brother, who can barely walk at the time, gets out of his chair, walks over to me, and gives me the biggest bear hug. He got it right. He knew what was up. The significance of the job that I got, and the day. And this is where I really hope that people watching this, I just hope people understand, like at home, like everyone's going through something, no matter what you see on the outside. I say goodbye to my brother. I go to the rink. My 2 nephews actually came, Tegan and Jesse, and man, how things work out and how blessed I am. They ended up in a box somehow that night with like Retz and Yari Curry and a bunch of like the Oilers. And but I had to call it.
Well done, man.
It was super special how that all worked out, and the Oiler organization. Like I could tell a bunch of stories, Bryn, even used as well. That goes way back, but I had to call a game that night. And I was probably awful. I know I was awful. But my family and him, and like, that's what everyone would have wanted, is you kind of keep plowing through. And that's the kind of stuff that he would want. I think of him all the time. My grandpa, he lived a great life. His life was celebrated. Gigi, Peter Shemerko was like 90 years old, and he was just the patriarch of her family. And Marty and him were so close. And, I always, my grandpa passed away the day I had to call the Olympic gold medal game in Beijing for the women's. And they didn't tell me. Right. But I just knew. Is that crazy? Like, I knew, but I was okay. Like, and I made the joke at his funeral that like Marty needed someone to have a beer or a wine with up there and watch Canada kick the United States ass and win the gold medal. So, I take a lot of pride in that. I think of my family a lot. There's a million kids that want my job. I'm driven so hard every day to be as good as I can be. I know how good I have to be to call a Game 7 someday. So that's what pushes me every single day. If I don't feel like it, if I have a headache, if I'm just, emotionally not there, I always think of those 2 guys, and it's like, show up, put out, get the job done. So to your point, Bryn, that's a long-winded answer, but yeah, those guys, that pushes me all the time. And for every, like, you know, people that don't believe in you or say you never were good enough, or you know, I'm my biggest critic. No one beats up on me more than me. I hold myself and our whole crew to a pretty high standard. So, you know, I'll keep pushing for myself and for those guys.
Brian, we'd be hard pressed to say there's something positive out of the experience of living and beating cancer or living with cancer. But what do you take away from the experience, what you went through yourself, what your brother went through, that you can now look back with some degree of distance and say, you know what, that changed me for the better?
Oh, you don't have enough time in this in your broadcast.
Yeah.
We gave out at our golf tournament. We gave out scholarships to kids that were battling cancer. That was important to me. And we started out, we were going to do one or two of like a couple thousand. And then the response was unbelievable. And it was like, we got to give up more than one or two. And we started giving up 5 per tournament. And kind of, it just kind of developed in its own thing. Whereas who got people, young men and women that got the scholarship would end up just coming to be the guest speaker the next year at the tournament. And it just kind of worked out that way. It wasn't planned that way. Just they wanted to come back. And so many of those young people just talked about the fact that they were given, you know, light. Their story was able to be shared, the feeling that they were being listened to and heard. And that was so important to them. And that resonated with me. I'll never forget a young lady who was going to be a doctor. She had to make a decision a few days before Christmas at one point, whether to cut off her leg or not. Like, there's just no bad days, guys. There's just no bad days, right? And she showed up the next year, just the biggest smile, prosthetic leg. Her fiance was a year off from, and now she is a doctor, by the way, and got up on stage and like that's the kind of stuff that like I will always remember from that tournament. I'll share one other one with you guys that will always, it's a young guy named Sam Smith, and he got, I think through Make-A-Wish, he got to hang out with Carey Price, and so he's at Habs skate, and I saw the Habs tweet like, you know, Sam, and he's a Hodgkin's lymphoma survivor. And I was like, and I just, Matt, who works with Montreal with the social media stuff, I just happened to say, oh, that's the cancer I had. And I said, and he's like, do you want to meet Sam tonight? I said, absolutely, bring him by the broadcast booth. That'd be awesome. And so it's myself and Mike Johnson calling that game, and he comes into the booth and, hey, Sam, what's up? I'm Bryan, and I meet his parents. And we just start chatting. And I said, you know what, Sam, I'm an old fart, and I had the cancer that you had. And he kind of laughs, and we talked about it, and we put his headset on, and his parents were in tears. And what that meant to them to just, it was my pleasure. I got more out of it than that kid did, I hope. Like, for me, that was like me talking to that guy when I was 17, you know, and it was like my absolute privilege to do it for Sam and his family. And that's what I take away from it. Like, that's, you asked me, like, what do I take, or what did I learn? Or it's just the ability to, I think, share your story and empower people to know, like, you know, I was given a 50% chance. You know, people ask me about, you know, when people hate on my call, or maybe they don't like me for whatever reason, I'm like, man, you're the least of my problems. Like, the crap that I've gone through to get where I am.
Well, this is exactly why we're doing this. Muddy, this is exactly why we're doing this podcast. You just summed it up beautifully. You were able to tell somebody who's going through exactly what you did and said, I'm doing Montreal Canadien hockey broadcasts. Yeah. I'm living my best life now, and I had as tough a time as you, and you can do it, man. You can do it, and that's the message that we're sending through this podcast, which I think is fantastic. The other thing that we because there's sports fans who are going to watch this who don't know anything about you. Now you've kind of peeled back a few layers on the onion talking about the cancer, but your career. Okay, so I know you grew up in Boyle. Where were you born, by the way?
Athabasca, Alberta. So I was born in Athabasca, which is like 30 minutes away.
The same birthplace as Jay Onright?
Jay, that's a whole other podcast. So Jay, I've known Jay since I was like a little guy. Jay was my brother's age. And it was hilarious because my first sports job was at 8 Channel Winnipeg. Jay was already there, and he was hosting the Big Breakfast morning show. So they were looking for like a sports guy. So, I mean, I remember trading hockey cards with Jay. I remember saying like, we trade hockey cards, and I like fleeced him for an Ed Belfour rookie card. Like, it's like, oh, this is like,
Nice.
the funny part is his sister Erin married my cousin Trevor. So that was actually written in the TSN like official press release when I was hired eventually. So I go there. I'm on the Big Breakfast show with my frosted tips. Like, I would fill in as the sports guy. So Jay and I worked there. Jay went to NHL Network. I went back to CTV Edmonton. Eventually actually worked with Bryn there, which was awesome, with Ryan Rashog. Then me and Reish were kind of poached in about 6 months time. And my first sports center was with Jay Onrait, which is really cool. So, Edmonton and Onrait and their families, I mean, we're still, obviously great friends and stay in touch. Dale and Joanne. Dale is his dad, and Joanne, so his mom Joanne and my dad Bob played in a Ukrainian rock band called the Rainbow Riders. You can't make this shit up. We have photos. I could send you some photos. It's hilarious. Jay put it on SportsCenter actually at one point. Anyways, totally true story. But Jay, our families go way back.
You're the voice of the Montreal Canadiens. That carries with it, I assume, heavy responsibility to do it right, given the market, given the interest in the team. I'm not saying that doing play-by-play anywhere else is, not important, but man, that's the original six stuff. And you feel like, you owe the audience the best Bryan Mudryk every game just because it's Montreal.
I owe that to Bryan Mudryk as well. But yes, I owe it to my family. I owe it to everyone who has believed in me. I owe it to everyone who has not believed in me. I walk in there, Dave, and I tweeted it this year, and I meant it. I always take the time when I walk up through the rafters and the 24 cups and the banners and, Henri Richard, Rocket Richard, Guy Lafleur, the banner, it's a big deal, man. The elevator's open and there's Danny Gallivan. Okay. It is such an honor. It's a privilege. Every game is a privilege. I never, ever, ever take it for granted, ever. Like I said, I don't care where my head's at, how I'm feeling, run down, cold, doesn't matter. You gotta, I pride myself on bringing the best I got all the time that night. So there's a lot of pressure. I have to be honest with you. The biggest broadcast for me where I actually felt the most weight was the recent Beijing games. Those women sacrificed so much during COVID. They were training in Calgary in a bubble, okay, weeks and weeks before even traveling, all right? Some of them were just engaged. Some of them were new moms. They go over there as a team. They're training. They're in the bubble, the quarantines. We didn't travel. We called it from downtown Toronto, myself and Cheryl Pounder. It was so important to me to do them and their families the honor they deserved. It was very important to me. That's probably the heaviest I've ever felt, actually, was that game, was that gold medal game. It was awesome. It was my dear friend, and I'm so grateful to call him a friend because he was my idol, Chris Cuthbert. We've had many talks about broadcasting, and I've always asked Chris, is there a perfect game? He's like, nope. He's like, you can't chase the perfect game. It just doesn't exist. And maybe that's why we love it. Maybe that's why I love the job so much. So I asked Chris one time, I said, well, were you close? And he kind of smiled the way that CC smiles, and he says, well, that 2010 game worked out pretty good, he says.
That was pretty good for him.
It was pretty good.
Right. Yeah. What about mentors? And I'm obviously CC, Chris Cuthbert would be one of them on the broadcast side. You have a few other mentors, not only career-wise, but also people that kind of helped you get through the cancer battle?
Bryn Griffiths. You let me be myself. Reg Thomas, rest in peace. Let me be myself. Took a chance on me. Steve Hogle, let me be myself. Reminded me where the line was, but let me be who I was and have a personality. Mark Milliere, who hired me. Paul Graham, who's my boss that pushes me. I would always, I would say Chris Durham at Nate, who showed up during my sickness and my chemo, and I always have time for Chris and Nate students. I'll never forget that. Ron Rimmer, who taught me how to write sports highlights at ITV back in the Annie Stark days when it was ITV. And I see
Sportsnet.
Jeff. Yeah.
Sportsnet. Yeah.
Well, I see Jeff Rimmer calling the Columbus games, and I always tell him to make sure you say hi to Ron for me, because I just never forget his generosity and his time with me. Certainly mentors, like I remember my first Worlds, and it was in Prague, and Gord Miller taking the time to come down and spend time with me, a rookie that has no idea how to pronounce Latvian names, still don't. So,
okay.
I've always admired, Gord's. He's kind of got that voice when the goal is called that lets you know that you better be watching. Dave Randorf's been very kind to me. I've always admired Dave's enthusiasm and his energy with his call. We've talked about CC. I just think he's got a very special place. And Chris, just what a great guy too. I didn't know they were doing this. He read my brother's eulogy on a Sens game when I was at the funeral and with my family, and that really meant a lot to me. And Bryn, I'll never forget. And I remember this stuff, man. I was a young reporter, and I just was finished my second or first bout with cancer, and you would always get me a media pass to come to watch the Oiler games. And I don't know if even you know this, Bryn, but my mom wrote a letter to Glenn Sather during my first run. And the Oilers weren't very good back then. Like Dougie Waite was there. Ryan Smith was a rookie. And I got to go back into the dressing room. And it was a rough year for them. And I remember they lost that night. But Doug Waite was so kind to me. Ryan Smith treated me like I was just one of the guys. And I got to, a couple years later, I was a reporter in that Oiler room. And I got to tell Ryan Smith that story. When he was doing some work with Hockey Canada at a U18 in North Dakota. That was really cool for me to get to share that. Ryan was like, I don't think he quite remembered, but, that was really nice I think it's so important to just acknowledge the people that lifted you up, that didn't beat you down.
I have to ask, we described you as versatile, and that's underselling. You're among the very best broadcasters in this country, assuredly. You do the fastest game on 2 feet. Yes, I know they have skates on.
Here it comes.
And then you do curling. Yeah. And they require powers of description that are so distinct, Bryan. How did you do the thing you do?
Well, I loved to curl. Alberta kid. You being CFL guys, well, both of you, but I curled in junior with a guy named Taylor Field. Oh. And that was the one year I went to provincials in Alberta. His parents were big Rider fans, obviously. So Taylor, we were out of Taylor Field. We were out of Lloydminster, and we made provincials. I delayed my second time around with chemotherapy. So I had a Broviac tube in my neck. So I was a third. I had to duct tape the Broviac tube to my chest around so I could sweep. Wow. Sundre, Alberta. Mark Kennedy, I'll never forget Mark, what a great guy, and obviously one of the best to do it, was at that provincials as well. The rule was, though, because I was still working at CKSA Lloydminster, I had to call in a radio report every day after whatever, win, lose, or draw. We didn't win a game. We lost every game. So I had to still call in every game and file a report on our massive losing streak. But it was so cool to go to a provincials. The first year the Saville Center opened up, it was a Balmoral at U of A, and then the Saville Center opened up. We won the first ever men's club championship. So there was a banner hanging there with my last name on it. And then the good team showed up, and then they kind of moved it. And then I think it was behind the air conditioner. And now I don't think it's even there anymore. But so curling was always it was one of my first loves. I curled on a 3-sheeter in Boyle. Loved the game. And when TSN back in 2009, that was my first Scotties and Briar, and got to work with Russ Howard, which is incredible for him and I. And he may not say the same. It was great to work with Russ my first year, and then eventually Kathy Gauthier at the Briar that year. But to know the game, and I like to think I make it easier on the analysts because I do know what's going on, and you can kind of like hand feed them a lot of the questions, and I love it. I love the players. They're so down to earth. They're kind, super generous with their time, and I really love the Scotties and the Brier every year. I truly do.
One part is that, and you take a look at guys who've done play-by-play of curling, and I knew Don Whitman. Don did great work with the Canadian Football League, was a great track and field announcer with Jeff Gowan at all the Olympics and the World Track and Field Championships. And then he also could do curling. He could do pretty much everything. He was kind of like the Dick Enberg of Canada for me. Then you get a guy like Vic Rauter. Vic's done a lot of stuff too.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that Don would be very proud of you, but you've had a chance, I'm sure, to talk to Vic as well, because Vic's done a million things at TSN.
Vic created, in my humble opinion, and it's my opinion, but Vic created curling play-by-play. That's just my opinion, but I mean, I will never forget, and I've told Vic this, and God bless Ray Turnbull, rest in peace. And when I was in the hospital fighting for my life at the Brier in Edmonton, Jeff Stoughton won it that year. Three draws a day. Gerald Shimko made the Final Four. I'll never forget that. Stoughton won it. Rusty was in that one. And that kind of kept me going through the chemotherapy and the garbage and the throwing up and the puking and the feeling like shit. Like, I had 3 draws a day to watch. And that's something I will always remember. And I'll never, ever forget the Olympic curling trials in 2009 that Kevin Martin and Cheryl Bernard won. Here I am back in the city where I was treated and whatnot. And Dr. Bob Turner that year, he was my doctor. And he would always come, and I think he knew because I had the curling on. He loved curling. He was diehard. He'd always come in and kind of linger in my room. And I was so drugged up on morphine or whatever, I didn't even know who was in my room. But anyways, he would watch. Like, he'd kind of hang and we'd talk curling. And so it just so happened that in 2009, here I'm calling play-by-play my first time doing it. And he's the doctor. He's the doctor. So it was really neat to run into him. And one of the coolest stories I have from curling, there's many, but when Brad Jacobs won the gold medal in Sochi, they came out, they were very kind. And it's a long flight from the Sioux, man. And I give those guys so much credit. They flew down, they were part of my tournament. And I asked them a favor. And little did Bob Turner know that when he was paged for something, wink, wink, he walks into his office, and here they are with their gold medals to say hi to my doctor that saved my life. Nice. And those boys, they took the time to walk around the ward where everyone was not well, and with the gold medals, and took about an hour. So, you know, Brad Jacobs, Ryan Fry, EJ Harnden, Ryan Harnden, it's a good dudes, man. It's a good dudes.
Hey, thanks for your time today. This is great. You know, your story is amazing. Your success is not amazing. It, to me, has been hard work for you, and I'm so proud of you. And I guess we can, to steal a Vic line, we can say, make the final Bryan Mudryk 1, cancer nothing.
I like to say I'm 2-0 because I had the relapse. So I'll
right.
You're on a run.
Write that down. We've got to change the score sheet before
Mudryk 2.
Yeah, Mudryk 2, cancer.
And if I may, I'll just may I toast to both of you guys for the work you're doing. I think this is a wonderful outlet. I think this is exactly what people need. I think it's just wonderful. So I toast you guys. I think we need more of this. Especially, I think it's so awesome that mental health is finally, especially for men, like coming to the forefront where we've been, I grew up in an era, and I'm certainly you guys, you know, be tough. And I think this is awesome. And I think it's okay to cry and laugh and scream and talk to people. Like, it's okay. It's good. It's actually, we should do it more. So great job.
Thanks so much. Means a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for today. We thank you for being with us as we talk sports and cancer on our podcast. We really hope the stories shared today will help make your day better and perhaps to inspire you to recognize so many have gone through so much. And there's positive stuff happening all the time on the Beat Cancer front.
Now, if you have a comment on today's podcast or a suggestion of somebody you'd like us to track down, then send us an email. It's my email address. It's Bryn, B-R-Y-N, at road55.ca. You can also check out our Twitter feed. The handle is @CancerInTheRoom. Or you can also check out our website, which is www.cancerintheroom.ca. On behalf of Dave Jamieson, I'm Bryn Griffiths, and thanks for joining us.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, check our website, www.road55.ca.